What's going on, everybody? Jolt here from TheTokenMinorities, and I am here with the draft analysis for your Kansas City Jirachiefs in Season 8 of the Global Battle Association. Really excited for this opportunity, but before I jump into this draft analysis, I do want to first and foremost welcome any new viewers to TheTokenMinorities. Just for a little bit of an overview for what we are as a channel. We are a collaborative channel, so you will not just be seeing videos from me on this channel. You will also see videos from Styx, who focuses on the Pokemon TCG as well as uploading some of his own Draft League content, and occasionally you'll also see uploads from Danza, who will also upload Draft League content, and occasionally some Smogon related stuff as well. Maddie Brolic and Aberforth are technically a part of TTM still. They haven't really uploaded in a while, but you know, those three are the ones you're mainly going to see stuff from. For me, it'll be GBA related almost entirely throughout this season. So that's just a little bit of some insight as to what we are. I hope you'll subscribe, stick around, and enjoy what we have to offer from TTM. Now, moving into the draft analysis here. So the GBA this season is having a tiers-based draft, which is in contrast to what they had last season. I believe last season it was a free draft, since I didn't really know too much about the new Pokemon that were released in Sun and Moon. But we are now in Ultra Sun and Moon. Most of us have a pretty good feel as to what these Pokemon can do at this point, and a lot of them got a little bit of a buff with some of the tutor moves, which is something I'm really excited for personally. Throughout all of Sun and Moon, I was simply not willing to draft a lot of the newer Pokemon because I didn't feel like they had enough coverage options, enough utility options, not having access to the tutor moves yet. But now that those are released, I'm much more willing to draft mons from Gen 7, and you're going to see that as a trend as I move through my draft here. But, so like I said, this is going to be a tiers-based draft once again, with us being required to draft a Tier 1, a Tier 2, 2 Tier 3s, a Tier 4, a Tier 5, the Mega, and then 4 free picks whose combined point value cannot exceed 400. Those points are based upon the tier that those Pokemon came from. So, yeah, so my draft position is number 13 overall, which is kind of unfortunate. It was totally randomized. I just got the sour end of the deal there. Number 12 and number 13, in my opinion, are the two worst possible draft positions you could have, especially considering that the GBA has 11 rounds of drafting, an odd number, making people who are later in the draft order have just a disadvantage from the beginning. So that was already kind of a rough start for me, so I didn't really expect to get much. I didn't really expect to get any of the top tier mons here in round one, just because number 13 means that there's going to be 12 really good Pokemon taken before it can be my turn, meaning that all of the Pokemon that I personally would really want to try, like a Tapu Koko, like a Cele-steal, just two big examples there, and maybe even Mew. Again, I love Mew in the D-League. It's very likely that those will already be gone by the time it's my pick, so I wasn't too optimistic. I was eyeing some really basic stuff, maybe like a Manaphy or something like that in round 1, but what actually ended up happening, somehow, someway, is that Cele-steal was still around when it was my turn to pick at number 13. And as many of you know, Cele-steal is incredible in the format, okay? Because it has incredible defensive typing and steel flying, only having 2 weaknesses to electric and fire, and also being an enormous offensive threat due to its natural bulk and access to autotomize. So, yeah, Cele-steal was around at round 1 for me, and I'm going to take that. So I picked up Cele-steal number 1 overall, going to nickname this bad boy after my buddy Maddie Brolic, naming him Brolic here. This is just an incredible Pokemon. I already pretty much explained why: the defensive typing as well as the ability to run autotomize and just be a general nuisance. Offensively, priority moves do not do the trick to take this thing out when it has a speed boost from autotomize. It's also naturally bulky. Beast boost is an incredible ability. Just a very substantial Pokemon to build a team around. It's one that can come to essentially any matchup, and definitely one I'm really excited to try out here. It didn't really get too many added benefits from the tutors, I don't think. I think the only real notable one off the top of my head is Superpower as a coverage move that it now gets, which would have its utility in certain matchups. But even so, just as a Pokemon, even without tutor moves in Ultra Sun and Moon, it quickly emerged, in my opinion and in the opinion of many others, as a top 5 Pokemon in the format, period, Megas included. And to see that type of Pokemon fall to number 13 overall was just really exciting for me. So I picked up Cele-steal, and that's what we're going to try to build this draft around for this season of the Global Battle Association. So let's talk a little bit about the roles and such that I'm trying to draft to support this Cele-steal, as because I'm drafting Cele-steal, because I intend to make Cele-steal one of my Z users, which, spoilers, I do. I believe you can see it on the graphic now as well, that I am going to be using Cele-steal as one of my Z users throughout this season, making it even more of an offensive threat, making it even easier to attain offensive beast boosts with the Cele-steal. Because I'm trying really hard to make Cele-steal shine in this draft, there's some roles I want to fulfill. First and foremost is to deal well with the Pokemon that will normally be brought to deal with Cele-steal. So Cele-steal, like I said, has 2 weaknesses, fire and electric. And both of those types share some characteristics. One being that both of them are resisted by dragon types. So I do want to have at least one solid dragon type on this team to be able to defensively support Cele-steal well. But in addition to that, the electrics and the fire types are also both weak to ground. So I want to make sure I have at least one good ground type on this draft to be able to offensively deal well with the things that offensively deal well with Cele-steal. But I'm going to take it a step further for this draft. I want to draft double dragons and double grounds, because then that will emphasize the fact that I'm trying to make Cele-steal shine as well as possible by having extra checks to the things that offensively beat Cele-steal, both offensive checks and defensive checks to the things that beat Cele-steal. It just puts Cele-steal in even a better position to be able to win late games in a variety of matchups throughout this season. So that's generally what I'm going to go for with this draft plan. Cele-steal plus double ground plus double dragon is the tentative draft plan moving forward, okay? Now, another thing that I was trying to focus on throughout this draft after picking up Cele-steal is that I want to make sure Cele-steal is not restricted to its defensive roles as a steel type. So in doing that, I needed to pick up a variety of bulky Pokemon that can switch into threats that Cele-steal would also be useful to switch into. For example, good psychic resists, for example, good flying resists is another big one, as well as trying to think of other key resistances Cele-steal has. I guess fairy types is another big one, having really good fairy resists, that type of thing. Trying to take defensive pressure off of Cele-steal is another key role that I'm trying to accomplish here through the Pokemon that I draft for this team. And the final thing is I do want to have solid hazard removal, as Cele-steal defensively is neutered a lot by Stealth Rocks, as it doesn't have access to, I don't really want to say reliable recovery, as leftovers and Leech Seed on a Pokemon like Cele-steal is still pretty effective, but it doesn't get Roost. Okay, so I want to make sure it can maintain as much health as possible in the case where I am bringing a more defensive set and really need to keep that health intact. So I want good hazard removal, I want good partners in the ground and dragon types, and I want to be able to have complementary Pokemon that can take care of Cele-steal's defensive roles given the appropriate matchup. So that's basically what I'm going for. Let's go ahead and dive on into the rest of the mons that I decided to pick up here. So for round 2, I really wanted Garchomp, okay, because Garchomp fills that role as the ground type as well as the dragon type all in one, plus giving me access to Stealth Rocks right off the bat. Unfortunately, Pokemon takes it right before my pick. Literally one pick before I was going to take it, Garchomp gone. So I have to adapt a little bit. I have a couple options to do that. I thought about maybe even not going with the dragon type in this round, maybe picking up something else in this slot that could also be a good offensive partner for Cele-steal, but what I actually ended up going with was a dragon type. I really felt like prioritizing a solid dragon type as well as prioritizing reliable hazard removal was a smart decision to complement Cele-steal early in the draft, and as a result, I ended up going with Latios. So Latios is a an old classic mon. It's been used in draft format way back since we first started. It's always been good. It's especially good now if I were to give it access to Z moves, but because I am giving Cele-steal the Z Crystal access, I'm not able to give Latios the Z Crystal access, unfortunately. But even so, offensively, Latios is pretty incredible, having 130 base special attack, I believe, and that's just insane. You don't switch into that very well, especially the combination of Psychic and Dragon Stab. So I'm not going to talk too much about the base stats and the moves that Latios can learn. I'm just going to assume you guys already pretty much know that well enough, at least. I'm going to talk more about its role and the fact that, like I've already mentioned, it's going to be able to switch into the electric and fire types that Cele-steal is obviously weak to. So that's very nice defensive synergy with Cele-steal, as well as being able to offensively threaten those Pokemon as soon as Latios comes in. So it's going to be a way of keeping up that offensive pressure whenever Cele-steal is forced out, as well as being the dual threat of being both a special sweeper and a physical sweeper and having access to defog. So those are the main reasons why Latios was such a good fit for my draft. I also love its speed tier at 110, as I really do like kind of bulky things that are pretty fast as well. Latios is not that bulky, but it's bulky enough to take the fire and electric hits that I needed to take in this role. So we have Cele-steal and we have Latios. Latios being a tier 1 free pick, so that is the first of my 4 free picks, and it essentially means that unless I get a low tier mega, I cannot pick up another tier 1 in this draft. So for my round 3 pick, I have a couple options. I could go for one of the better tier 2 Pokemon remaining, but let me rant a little bit, okay? I think that GBA's tier 2 is garbage. Alright, GBA tier 2 needs to improve a lot before I am willing to draft a Pokemon from tier 2 in the first 3 rounds. Okay, I'm going to be working on that. Hopefully we can get that sorted before next season, but I'm going to put my tier 2 on the back burner just like I did in the D-League. In the D-League, I got Scolipede in the last round of the draft, the tier 2 pick for my team, because I just didn't like how any of the tier 2s fit with my tier 1 core synergetically. So that's actually going to be the case once again here. Nothing in tier 2 really stands out to me as something that I want to extend for and grab as early as possible. So what I'm going to do instead is to try to pick up the best possible value pick I can find in tier 3. And there's a couple options for that. One was Crocodiles. Crocodile is a solid ground type. It would replace the fact that I wasn't able to get Garchomp in round 2. As well as being both the ground type and as being a rocker, and every draft wants a dark type as well. But what I actually ended up doing, instead of going for Crocodile, which is I think a pretty good deal in tier 3, I just didn't really feel like Crocodile warranted a round 3 pick. I was going to more so try to get that in round 4 if I could. What I actually ended up going with is Arcanine in tier 3, as Arcanine is, in my opinion, undervalued. The GBA values Arcanine as a tier 3 and Entei as a tier 2, which in my opinion should be reversed. I think Arcanine's a bit better due to having better abilities, and as well as just overall more utility, I think, than Entei. Entei is a little bit stronger, I believe, and has Sacred Fire, which is a good move, but Arcanine can just do so much more. So I'm a little surprised that Arcanine's in tier 3. I felt like that was undervaluing it, so I wanted to go ahead and pick that up here in tier 3 because of its value and because of the fact that I feel like synergetically it still fits well with this draft, being yet another fire resist to support the Cele-steal, as well as having priority, which I do really want priority on this draft. One of the things that kind of held me back in D-League, I felt, was that my priority options were somewhat restricted to Mew and Mega Kangaskhan, neither of which really wanted to run priority, but Arcanine doesn't really have issues running extreme speed. In most cases, I think it can just kind of slap it on as the 4th move if it wants to, and people have to respect it. Plus, it's +2 priority instead of +1, so it's just a really good priority option to have on the draft. Plus, having access to Intimidate is always nice to help Cele-steal and potentially get a setup. It's also just a really good way to help alleviate some of the defensive pressure from Cele-steal, with Arcanine being able to switch into both grass types and bug types, as well as fairy types, all things that Cele-steal would have wanted to be the defensive response to, Arcanine can now do instead in its place. So I really do like Arcanine on this draft. maybe not an essential teammate for this, but it was just too good of a bargain, in my opinion, in Tier 3 for me to pass up at this stage in the draft, so that's why I ended up going with it. So now moving on to my round 4 pick. Like I said, I really want a Crocodile. I need rocks on this draft. I don't have rocks on this draft yet, and Crocodile gets taken like 2 picks before me. So yeah, second pretty annoying snipe of the draft. Not able to get my ground type just yet that I really want to be able to support the Cele-steal. But what I can do here is go ahead and target down my Mega Evolution, as I have been eyeing two Mega Evolutions. I was kind of looking at Mega Gardevoir early, maybe as the round 2 pick after getting Cele-steal, opted for Latios instead. But as soon as I picked up Latios, I already knew which Mega I wanted. And that Mega is Mega Venusaur, because Mega Venusaur and Cele-steal have basically perfect type synergy together. Let me think about this. The only imperfection between that type synergy is Cele-steal's fire weakness, which is currently covered by Latios and Arcanine. So that core of Cele-steal, Latios, Arcanine, Mega Venusaur defensively is absolutely disgusting. I don't think there's anything outside of Ghost and Dark that's able to hit that neutrally. I'm fairly sure on that. I might be wrong. I'm just doing this off the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure that's correct. So yeah, that core is pretty darn gross. Okay, so I'm definitely excited to be using Cele-steal and Mega Venusaur together. I've seen it do really well as a core in one of the NPL tournaments, the NPL Minors tournament not too long ago, as well as in just the TTM tournaments. That core, the Cele-steal and Mega Venusaur, is just a really disgusting defensive core for teams to deal with. And both of them can operate very well defensively on their own, even without the other partner. Plus, Mega Venusaur this generation, I think, might be a little bit better, actually, just from what I've seen. I think it might be a little bit better than what it was in ORAS, and I want to test that out for myself, just to confirm my suspicions on that, as I have seen Mega Venusaur just do a lot of work, especially if I'm able to properly predict around Z moves that otherwise would be able to weaken the Mega Venusaur. So, yeah, I really do like it synergetically with this team, and just a defensive powerhouse that has a few tricks up its sleeve as well that I'm excited to try to use here in the GBA. So that's my first 4 picks. Now we need to really badly get that ground type, okay? Because I don't have rocks on this team, and I don't have a ground type either, and I keep getting sniped. So I decided at this point I need to get that ground type no matter what, because if I don't get it now, I'm going to be stuck with bad ones later in the draft. So what I'm going to do is actually pick up again a mon that I had in the GBA D League, one that I think is one of the best value picks in Tier 4, just due to its overall utility and just how well it fits this draft right now. And that is Seismitoad. So once again, we're going to be drafting Seismitoad. Again, it's a great rocker, just like in D League. It was a very reliable Pokemon for me. It's not really going to get a bunch of kills, obviously, because it's a Seismitoad. It's not exactly that big of a threat offensively, but even so, it fills the role I need it to fill, as being both the bulky water and the ground type, and having access to Stealth Rock. Now, unfortunately, it's not some powerhouse ground type. I really wanted to have something, really threatening offensively to help out Cele-steal. Like Garchomp would have been great offensively. Crocodile is pretty solid offensively, especially with the Choice Scarf. Seismitoad is not really that, but that's okay, because it really does fill the defensive role that I need. But it also, like I said before, I want to get multiple ground types, okay? I want to get multiple ground types because that gives me additional ways to be able to deal with those offensive checks to Cele-steal. So what I'm actually going to do, along with the round 5 Seismitoad, is I'm going to pick up the Zygarde Doggo. Now, I will back up real quickly. I don't think I ever mentioned the nicknames on these Pokemon. You've seen them on the screen. Latios is going to be nicknamed after Omega, because I nicknamed my Gourgeist Omega in the D-League, and I never actually was able to bring it, so I felt kind of bad. I'm going to give Latios the nickname Omega. Arcanine is going to be named after my buddy LeJon Flames, guy in my front office, super helpful. And Mega Venusaur named after Carnihobo, because he is the master of grass types, so I figured he would enjoy being nicknamed after Mega Venusaur. And Seismitoad named after my buddy Tone, also a member of my front office. Now, Zygarde 10% named after Top Tier Boy, who was a coach in the NPL, used Zygarde Doggo super well. Definitely wanted to give him a shout out here through this Pokemon. So Zygarde 10% is my second ground type and my second dragon type, filling that last position, also giving me a nice base 115 speed tier with extreme speed and 1000 arrows. Definitely a Pokemon that supports Cele-steal super well. Really does perfectly, honestly, support the the initial roles that I mentioned here at the very beginning. Now I want to be able to punish the electric and fire types. Zygarde Doggo does that both defensively, not that it has good defensive type or good defensive stats, but it is able to switch into any one of those and immediately offensively pressure with a very spammable move in Thousand Arrows, as well as the it's spammable, making it easy to run something like a Choice Band or a Life Orb or something like that if I want to. Specifically Choice Band, as Banded Thousand Arrows is just kind of the staple set of Zygarde 10%. So yeah, excited to use that as well. Zygarde 10 is a mon I've been looking forward to for quite a while, been wanting to use rather for quite a while, so I'm excited that it actually fits this draft pretty well here too. So that is my first 6 picks. Moving on to my round 7 pick. And at this point, there's a few roles that I still want to fill. I don't have a fairy type yet. That's kind of a big one. I don't have a dark type yet. That's also pretty big. Those are the 2 biggest things, in addition to the fact that I actually don't have any momentum on my draft yet either. Momentum or even taunt I don't think is on this draft at this point either. So those are some pretty big roles that I want to be able to fill, just based upon my playstyle, knowing how I like to prep for certain builds of teams or certain builds of drafts. Those are some things that I'm looking for here as the draft progresses. What I decided to do here in round 7, because nothing really stood out to me as something I really wanted in a higher tier. Again, tier 2 was just not full of stuff that I wanted to take at this stage in the draft. I figured I could just grab something at the very end and be happy with it, and I still agree with that point. But even so, what I decided to do here for round 7 is actually pick up a tier 5, the very first tier 5 pick of the draft, and I wanted to get this here for 2 reasons. One being that I've never had this Pokemon before, and 2 being that I think it's the best tier 5 option available, period, without question. And that is Rotom Ghost. So Rotom Ghost is a super underrated Pokemon, especially in a tiers draft where most tier 5 Pokemon are utter garbage and you can't really bring them without just sacrificing them for like Stealth Rocks or whatever their one role is. Rotom Ghost can do a few things. Rotom Ghost is a good Scarfer. It has both Electric and Ghost Stab, which is a solid type combination. It's able to, between the 2 of them, hit almost everything neutrally, which is pretty crazy. But also, the combination of being an electric type and a ghost type with Levitate resist a lot of common dual stabs from top tier threats. For example, stuff like Hawlucha, stuff like Diggersby, those are 2 Pokemon that generally don't have many switch-ins. Rotom is able to deal well with the dual stabs of both of them, so that's pretty crazy. Another example being Cobalion, with Fighting and Steel being something that Rotom can resist. There's just a lot of really niche dual stab resistances that Rotom has that I really like. Despite the fact that its base stats are very low, it's still able to accomplish the role of checking those pretty well, which is something that the rest of my team wasn't really able to do at this stage. Plus, it has access to momentum. That's something I was looking for, as well as being a defogger this in Ultra Sun and Moon, picking up the defog move tutor. That's also something that's pretty cool. Might be kind of hard to fit that on Rotom. That's kind of something I found as well, just on the ladder and whatnot when building with Rotom Wash, is that it doesn't really want to run Defog. It kind of prefers to have Pain Split and whatnot, or Status Move, but, you know, I might be able to fit it on Rotom. I don't always need to run Recovery on it, especially if I am building a more offensive team. So just something to think about in my building, but definitely a Pokemon that I think is a solid value pick from Tier 5, and that's why I decided to pick it up as early as I did. I also like its speed tier of 91. That's pretty good. It's not incredible, but for a Pokemon that's going to be more of a bulky offensive pivot, it's not really bulky, but like its typing effectively makes it bulky, if that makes sense. Even so, solid mon, excited to use it. We're going to nickname this one after my buddy Vandalex or Baby Eric. So yeah, cool. Now next up is going to be my my fairy type. So I was looking at a few options here. I was looking at Comfey, I was looking at Diancie again, but what I actually ended up settling on was Gardevoir. So Gardevoir is pretty cool. I've never used it before in draft format, but I've only seen it do well. It's a fantastic Scarfer. Base 80 speed is not amazing, but with the Choice Scarf and with the pretty spammable dual stab of Fairy and Psychic, it's a Pokemon that is pretty easy to use, I think. And having access to both Healing Wish and Memento are 2 really nice support moves for a Cele-steal, which likes to have those free turns of setup in the face of things that can't really touch it. And Gardevoir has a good way of forcing in those Pokemon that Cele-steal loves to set up on being those steel types, being especially steel types, and potentially, let me think, steel types are the main one, is the main one I guess that I'm thinking of. Fire types is another one, but Cele-steal doesn't exactly set up on fire types, so that's a moot point. But regardless, yeah, the Gardevoir is pretty cool. It's also good as a Wish Passer, which something that could benefit or could help out my Mega Venusaur, Arcanine, Cele-steal as well if I want to run a Wish Passing Gardevoir. In some matchups that does work out pretty well, but more often than not, it'll want to be offensive, I think, just because it's pretty darn strong. I think it's like base 125 special attack or something like that. So yeah, really solid mon. Excited to use it on this team. Sorry to Mono, I definitely sniped him on this one, but it was something that I really needed to have on this draft, I felt. Now moving into the last few picks, I still have this issue, okay, where I don't have, I only have one rocker, okay, I only have one rocker in Seismitoad. I still don't have a dark type. I don't really have many ways to deal with bulky psychics either, and bulky psychics are almost always going to come against a Mega Venusaur draft. So I have a few important roles I still need to patch. I also only have one momentum user still at this stage. I like my defensive core though. My defensive core is pretty gross. I like my priority options and double extreme speed. I like how I built around Cele-steal so far, but the work is not quite done because I still don't think this is a good draft yet. Okay, I'm still missing a few key, excuse me, a few key roles that I think need to be filled here before all is said and done. So the first thing I'm going to try to deal with here is the fact that I don't have a dark type. I felt like I needed to pick that up as early as possible so that my dark type is respectable. Right now I have access to 2 tier 4 picks from the free points pool as well as my tier 2 pick remaining. So I thought about something like Bisharp quite strongly for that dark type, pulling that from tier 2, but I opted against it just because I don't really think it is worth my tier 2 pick. It was tough. I really debated it strongly, and also being another stealth rocker could have been a good reason to pick up Bisharp. I decided not to do it though, and instead opted for a Lowland Persian for my tier 4 dark type. I feel like Parting Shot is a really nice move on this draft because it helps give Cele-steal free setup opportunities as well by using Parting Shots on maybe an incoming fighting type to a Lowland Persian or maybe an incoming dark type. Either way, Cele-steal can set up on either of them pretty easily. So it partners well with Cele-steal as well as being able to Parting Shot into my defensive members for free recovery potentially for them based on what my opponent decides to switch into the Lowland Persian. So Parting Shot's a good move. It's also good with Taunt and Foul Play as being my first Taunt user on this entire draft outside of Gardevoir. Gardevoir and a Lowland Persian are my 2 Taunt users on this draft at this point, but I felt like I definitely wanted to have at least a couple of them. I'm not really sure how I feel about a Lowland Persian yet, I'm gonna be honest, but I'm nicknaming this one after my buddy Adam the Bee's Knees because he is the one who has been really trying to convince me that a Lowland Persian's a good Pokemon in the format. I'm going to test his theory, I guess, and draft it myself and see how it goes. Definitely going to be hitting him up for some help on how to use it throughout the season because I really don't know how to use it. But yeah, we decided to pick it up here and give it a shot as my dark type for this draft. Now, for my next pick, I decided to go ahead and grab my tier 2 because I wanted to make sure I got the tier 2. There were some teams that were still able to pick up high tier Pokemon since they picked up a low tier Mega Evolution as well, so I wanted to make sure I got what I wanted. Again, there really wasn't anything specific that I really wanted out of tier 2, but I did still feel like I wanted momentum. I did still feel like I wanted another breaker on this team. I don't really have the best wall breakers on this draft, I didn't think. At this stage anyways, at least not on the physical side. Zygarde 10's pretty good as a wall breaker, but it is only base 100 attack. And even with a choice band that doesn't necessarily hit, you know, that hard. So what I'm actually going to end up going with here is the old mascot. So as soon as I drop the Toronto Staraptors franchise and move on to the Kansas City Jirachiefs, then, yes, then I can go ahead and pick up my old mascot, that being Staraptor. So Staraptor joins the Kansas City Jirachiefs as the tier 2 pick with a nice base 120, I believe, attack stat, base 100 speed, excellent Scarfer with the Reckless ability. And Intimidate has its uses as well if I wanted to run more of a bulky set. So yeah, basically picking it up as a breaker. Starting to lose my voice here, I apologize. basically picking it up as a breaker, as well as just being just a good Pokemon. Okay, it's one of the better tier 2s remaining, I thought. It has access to momentum, which is another thing that my team was lacking. Picked up a little bit more here in the late rounds with Rotom, Alolan, Persian, and Staraptor, but overall it's basically meant to take advantage of the grass types that opponents are forced to bring to deal with Zygarde. So Staraptor and Cele-steal both really abuse those grass types and those bug types as well, that have to be brought if an opponent wants to have a resistance to Zygarde 10. So the offensive synergy of this draft is pretty disgusting. Okay, that's the biggest advantage to this draft right now, I think, is that offensive synergy is very good and the defensive core is very good as well. Yeah, unfortunately, we still only have one rocker, okay? We still only have one rocker on this draft, and we have one pick left, so in theory, we could try to patch that weakness, but we're actually not going to, okay? And that's because there's another key weakness on this draft that I alluded to earlier, and that is the fact that I kind of lose to bulky psychics right now, and there's not a whole lot I can do about it, because bulky psychics can come in on stuff like Mega Venusaur and even Cele-steal and just set up in my face potentially. Or even Arcanine too, Zygarde. So I felt like I really needed a way to offensively deal with bulky Calm Mind Psychic types, like the Reunicluses of the world, like the Mews, like the Cresselia, stuff like that. And I felt like it was more important to address that than to address a second Stealth Rocker, at least at this stage. Now, I will be changing up this draft a little bit, okay, in free agency very quickly once the season starts, because I see flaws in it that I want to fix, and I'm going to do my best to fix those as soon as possible so that they don't hinder me throughout the season. Really losing my voice here. But essentially what I decided to do was to pick up Durant in my last slot here. Staraptor nicknamed RIP Toronto, forgot to mention that because RIP Toronto. Durant is going to be nicknamed after Stormtroopers because Hustle is a good ability. But Durant is going to be my psychic killer essentially for this draft. Also a nice offensive speed tier. Again, my second ice resistance on this draft. Not that it's really a resist, but you know, it might come in handy. You never really know. But yeah, Durant's kind of a monster. If you can hit your attacks through the hustle ability, Durant can just wreck things. I really wish I could have made this a Z crystal holding Durant, but unfortunately the GBA Z budget doesn't allow that, and instead I was forced to give Rotom Ghost the Z eligibility along with Cele-steal. But even so, Durant is a pretty cool mon, access to a lot of cool techs. It even has Baton Pass, it has Entrainment with Truant, which is a weird tech that I could potentially bring in. I might do it if I'm feeling gimmicky, but you never really know. Regardless, offensively it's a freaking powerhouse, and I really needed that way to deal with the bulky psychic type, so that's why we decided to pick it up here. So that's kind of the brief draft analysis for what I have here. Now, like I said, I do intend to make some transactions very early in the season, so don't get too comfortable with what this team is right now, as it is going to change around a little bit. Most notably, I really want a second Stealth Rocker, so I'm going to have to make some moves to make that happen. Eyeing a few options in Tier 1 to potentially like drop Latios for that or something, maybe. Also eyeing some options down in Tier 3 as well, so you'll see what ends up happening there. As the transactions happen. They wouldn't happen until week 2, so this is the team you can expect to see from me for week 1, where we're going to be facing off against Necrostevo and the Victorian Shadows. But yeah, I hope you do kind of like the draft. I kind of like it. Some changes to be made, obviously. You can be looking forward to that, but let me know what you think about this in the comments below. I hope I explained my thought process behind the draft as well as possible, and yeah, I hope you did enjoy. So we're going to go ahead and wrap this one up here. Hope you guys are looking forward to the week 1 uploads coming up this weekend. We have the team builder coming up on Saturday, where you'll see the team that I am bringing to take on Necrostevo and the Victorian Shadows, and then on Sunday you can expect the battle upload between me and him. So hope you guys enjoyed. Have a good one. Later.